क्या भाई, मैं और मेरा लैपटॉप हो गया. So yeah, it would be really lovely to see some of the faces. तो साहिल ने ऑन कर दिया. साहिल, you have my respect. Good to see you. तो तुम लोगों ने अपने नाम के साथ अपना रोल नंबर भी डाला है.
Actually, we were asked to do so. It's my college ID actually.
कॉलेज आईडी. So ये अगर तुम allow नहीं करते, ये मैं मेरा
कुछ अटेंडेंस पर्पसेस के लिए होता है मेनली ये कि उसमें अगर अटेंडेंस दिखती है. हाँ,
तो यहाँ पर कितने लोग अटेंडेंस के लिए आ रहे हैं और कितने लोग एक्चुअली इंटरेस्टेड हैं, ये भी जानना पड़ेगा.
एक्चुअली फॉर द क्लासेस के लिए आ रहे हैं.
No, so wait, so all the people who have put their roll numbers next to the names have come for attendance, and those who have not put their roll numbers have actually come because of interest.
Yeah. That is the point.
No, actually we are interested, but during classes we use the same Gmail ID, so it's actually the case is that we use the same Gmail ID, hence our roll numbers are there. Although we're interested.
But attendance is जरूरी है, like attendance.
Yeah.
दिल से बात नहीं करनी. दिल के पेन की आवाज आई है तो. How much is your percentage attendance? You know that you have to.
Unofficially speaking, like I'd like to stop the recording here, but it's 75% officially. लेकिन मतलब वो हो जाता है ऊपर नीचे.
हमारा भी we had 75%, but हमारा काफी strict. अगर 65% के नीचे हो गया, 75 के अंदर मेडिकल सर्टिफिकेट ला सकते हैं.
मेडिकल सर्टिफिकेट.
Yes. I was studied at NIT Kurukshetra. So 65 के नीचे they wouldn't allow you to get to the next year. It's very strict. तो वही होता था, हम लोग ऐसे सोचते थे कि if 75% attendance करता है तो 3 क्लासेस के बाद चौथी बंद करके, you know, it was always like that.
वो स्ट्रेटजी बनी हुई है.
स्ट्रेटजी हमेशा वही रहती थी कि चौथी क्लासेस स्किप करेंगे. But then we started realizing after a few semesters कि जो ना हो सकता है कि कभी जो ना dangerous situation आ जाए and you miss 2 classes back to back. So then you start off with, you know, missing a class and make sure that you do the rest of it, or you bladder a lot and then take 2 classes off. तो ये बहुत सारी बनाई थी strategies हम लोगों ने.
You mastered that strategy as well. वो strategy पर master कर ली.
यही तो हम जाते थे, बाकी सीखने कौन जाता था. तुम लोग तो बहुत क्लास वो सीखने आते हैं.
वो रिकॉर्ड होता समय इसीलिए.
तुम तो वैसे भी you are what secretary of the club. तुम तो वैसे भी में सबके, you know, everybody has to look at you as a certain. तुम तो ऐसे भी मजाक भी नहीं करते. अगर ये बोलता है तो हम भी
निकल जाके फिर वो टीचर को बोलते हैं कि हाँ सेक्रेटरी तो ये कह रहे थे तो मतलब शायद ऐसे ही होता होगा.
गलत बात है. तो रिप्रेजेंट करना अपने कॉलेज को, अपनी कम्युनिटी को, अपने debate club ko. What is this? What kind of a
debating and literary club? Seriously.
Debating. How often do you actually do debates and literature?
Like for the last 5 years, we have over 200 podium finishes in debating across the national.
Wow, what are you saying? And this is what inter
university, yes.
University में तुम अच्छा तो you are part of which stream? Are you how does it work between in the university?
Like what exactly?
Inter-university.
Like every university, every college, they like periodically organize debate competitions, right? So we send out our teams on trial basis. We conduct trials, so the people participate from within the university.
State level या city? कौन से level? What level है? Can you win podium finishes?
No, it's national level.
Oh wow, what are you saying? So कौन सी universities में होते हैं ये सारे competition?
But DU के सारे almost सारे colleges में होते हैं. राजधानी college, छत्रपति college. Deharan College, Law College, Dehradun, LPU, Chandigarh University, Jamia Millia Islamia, and like South East universities हैं. Central University Hyderabad, something like that, yeah.
मैं तो मजाक पूछा, तुम तो serious हो गई. देखो, हाँ, 29 podium finishes. Yeah, really, really यार exciting. I wish I could see a debate. अपने ज़माने में भी करता था ये सब कुछ. But I used to enjoy more being a moderator because I would do a lot of research, and then my favorite part was just like asking impossible questions to the people on the panels. मुझे पता था वो answer नहीं आते होंगे. So it was like no matter who wins, you know, I always win.
I am pretty confident that you get to test your own condition today with Yuvaa.
Yeah, it'll be fun. I'm excited.
If all study, like, can we start?
Yeah, of course. I'm for you guys.
Okay, like I'll introduce you to the. I think most of us know you already. But Nikhil Taneja sir is a writer, he's a producer, he's a storyteller, teacher, public speaker, and mental advocate, and that list goes on and on and on, and a lot of other things as well. He's the co-founder and CEO of Yuvaa, mission-driven youth media research and impact organization that focuses on creating socially conscious content and initiating meaningful conversations. Something that we're looking forward to today as well. Sir is also a member of the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation's Goalkeepers event and Community's Global Advisory Board, and is one of only 10 persons in the world chosen for this position. He's also worked in the Indian media and entertainment industry for over a decade at Y Films, the youth wing of Yash's Films, where he headed the development and production and was member of the team that won the Cannes Grand Prix Glass Line 2016 for the Six Peg Band. That list goes on without ending, actually. Since 2018, he's also been the festival creative director of the Indian Film Project, India's largest youth film festival that gets a footfall of over 10,000 people. He also advises.
अब तुम LinkedIn का वो डाल दो बेशक तो ना लिंक डाल देना, let them read it, let it चलता रहेगा. मैं तो पूरा डाल, तुम तो पूरा पढ़ने लग गए. वो तो
बस लास्ट
ये बेसिकली अपडेट तभी होता है कि तब जो ना जॉब के बीच में होता है ना, तब अपडेट आते हो कि चलो अगली बारी ये होता है, but then you forget, then everybody uses that as an introduction for the next one. But no, thank you. It's a great introduction. Thank you so much.
We're excited to have you. Obviously, we're excited to have you. But someone who is more excited to have you is obviously Yuvaa. She has been speaking about you more than any one of us. And
I would actually like to give Yuvaa's introduction. You know, Yuvaa is one of the nicest, best, kindest people that I have met in my life. In COVID second wave, when people were literally dying all around us, you know, we put out a call of action and said, is there anybody who would like to help around as a volunteer? She obviously, came on board, and she was somebody that was in every 2.5, 3 months, हम लोगों ने actively helping people across the country. I think we ended up saving more than 2,500 lives, and Yuvaa was part of this entire thing throughout, from the beginning to the end. In every meeting she was there. She was one of the youngest people over there, and I think one of the most hardworking people that I've met. So Yuvaa asked me to be anywhere. I'm like, yes, I'm there. You don't just tell me when. So I'm just so happy that I'm getting to be part of this with her. I'm a huge fan of her work. You think that if she says something nice about me, let me just put that in advance. काम करना, career पे काम करना तो सभी कर लेते हैं. इंसानों के साथ humanity वाला काम करना सबका नहीं होता. And so big cheers to her. I would say that, like, अगर तुम लोग, I hope तुम already काफी इज्जत देते हो, but नहीं देते तो ज़्यादा देना. Deserves it.
What do you then?
Thank you so much, Abhijay, for that amazing introduction. And I was not expecting to say this, but thank you so much, Nikhil sir, for that introduction. The entire credit goes to you for kickstarting that program in the midst of the pandemic. Not many people were ready to take up such a huge initiative. And like many people here, and including myself, a very less known fact about Nikhil sir is that he's an NRI kid. And he was born and brought up in Bahrain. And that is the place from where his writing career basically started. It all started from a rejected piece of, I think, drawings that he used to send to the Young Times, which is a part of the Khalij-based magazine group. So taking that into consideration, I would like to frame it into a question. How would you guide the young writers in the audience? What would be the piece of advice you would give to them?
I don't even know where you found that out. I don't know where I've said this, but this is like...
Sir, I can assure you, I was not stalking you for the past 2 months.
ये बहुत ही, I don't even know when I've said all of this out, but thank you for noticing this. No, so my writing journey, honestly, as Yuvaa was saying, so interestingly started out of jealousy. I'll tell you how. My brother used to be a artist, okay, and he was younger than me. I was thinking, what? I would have been 8 years or 9 years old. 9 years old, I think he was about 6 years old. He was 3 years younger than me, okay. And वहाँ पर एक बहुत famous I was growing up first in Dubai and then in Bahrain. And Dubai used to have this magazine called Young Times, which is part of the Khaleej Times. And they used to be Young Times. They used to have a column where people can make their art and send it across, and they'd publish it. So my brother, this 6-year-old, artist, actual bloody artist, at 6 years old, would make these beautiful drawings, and then he'd send it across to them, and they'd publish it, right? And then I was also like, यार मैं बड़ा भाई हूँ, मुझे भी होना चाहिए publish. ये क्या बात है? So I started making drawings, but my drawings were terrible. They were just like, there's no polite way of saying it. It was just absolutely bullshit. And so I would send it, and they never publish it. And I was just like, यार ये क्या bias है कि मेरे भाई डालता है drawing, उसकी publish हो जाती है. मैं सोचता तो उस time पे बहुत अच्छी drawing, तो मेरी क्यों नहीं publish होती, क्या बकवास है. So then I got very agitated one day when the third or fourth drawing of my brother got published, who's my younger brother, and I didn't get published. So I got very agitated. I wrote a letter. I was like, you know what, Young Times, this is the last time I'm writing to you. In fact, I'm very disappointed in your behavior. I have been sending so many drawings, you never publish it, etc., etc. मैंने गुस्से में आके भेज दिया. And then the letter got published. And then I was like, यार मेरी drawing publish नहीं हो रही, but मेरी letter publish हो रही है. हो सकता है मैं writing मेरा better था drawing से. And then I started writing. I was like, ये अच्छा है, ये publish होता है. And I started writing them many more letters, and then the letters started getting published more and more. I used to write about different things, and somewhere something clicked. And then I ended up, actually reaching out to them and saying that, listen, you've been publishing a lot of my letters. I live in Bahrain, and I shifted to Bahrain by then. I was like, I live in Bahrain. There's a lot of, Indian celebrities who come here. What if what if I interview them for you? आपकी magazine का नाम Young Times है. Can I be a youth correspondent for your magazine? And I mean, it was just, again, this was the early days of the internet. Email अभी नया नया बना था, तो मेरा बहुत शौक था कि मैं सबको कुछ ना कुछ कोशिश करते हैं, इंटरनेट पे कुछ ना कुछ करके देखते हैं क्या होगा क्या नहीं होगा. What is the worst that could happen? They'll reject it. But I sent it. I took my, अब कहते हैं ना, shoot your shot. So I was the OG shooting your shot person. मैं तो हर चीज के लिए I was just, कहीं भी मैंने email देखा, मैं email भेज देता था. मैंने कहा चलो कहीं लिखा हुआ email, I will send a writing, I will send this, I will send that, हर चीज कोशिश करेंगे. And उनका response आ गया. They said, that's a great idea. Why don't you do an interview and send it across? And the first interview that I ever did, this is very embarrassing because this guy is like a terrible guy now. But I was 14 or 13 at that time, and obviously he was famous at that time, so please don't judge me. It's Sajid Khan, who is very well known for in terrible reasons now. But for whatever it's worth, he was very sweet to me as a 14-year-old. And then I interviewed, in fact, Junoon band, and they had come to Bahrain. So I interviewed them. Then I interviewed Shankar Ehsaan Loy. Then I interviewed a bunch of people who'd come there. And by the time I was 17, I had interviewed Michael Schumacher. By the time I was 20, I interviewed Shah Rukh Khan. So all of this entire journey of mine started with me it started with jealousy, as I said. But I think the reason that I've told you this entire thing and where it started from, what it led to, was that I was always interested in, I didn't care at all about, लोग क्या सोचेंगे या क्या समझेंगे. I would always just, if there's a shot to take, I'd take it. It was always for me very clear that what is the worst that could happen? They won't respond. What is the worst that could happen? I have also, I've done some ridiculous things like sending at 14 or 15, 16 or something. I'm 15, 16. I have applied to the Guinness Book of World Records saying I'm the youngest journalist in the world. And then they cut back saying, नहीं, एक 9 साल की लड़की थी. मैंने कहा यार थोड़ा रह गया, मैंने चलो कोई बात नहीं. So, but whatever, it was just something that I did, because I was like, internet hai, time hai, you have the opportunity over here. How many people, before the internet ever got these kind of opportunities, and now for you all, you have you to have like the whole and then keep taking feedback, keep making sure that you're doing better, you are improving on what you're doing, but all of that will just come with X amount of effort. That's I think the best thing that I can say about how to go about writing.
Thank you so much for such an elaborate answer. And you have literally covered all the points which
देखो
were
ये
supposed to be.
पहले से मैं एडवांस में बोल रहा हूँ कि तुम मेरे से एक क्वेश्चन पूछोगे, मैं 4 क्वेश्चन के आंसर दूंगा. So that's just how I am.
Don't worry, we have a wide variety of questions prepared for you. The reason is because you have accomplished so much in various fields, whether that includes interviews, whether that includes script writing, or it includes writing a book. It has like basically everything. So we'll be asking you questions from everything. And you have been very closely associated with the mental health of Gen Z, and you have even started a platform as well. So, and while working with you, I would like the audience to know this, that when we were working under him, he used to arrange sessions for us with psychiatrists and psychologists to help us get motivated, because there were times when we used to call the patient and then the family of the patient would go like, he's dead. So that started taking a toll on us, and we were really demotivated. It lowered down our morale. We were getting dead calls. So he was very closely associated with our mental health as well. Right now, we are going through a transitory phase of COVID. And even though we have progressed as a nation in various sectors, mental health still remains a taboo. That is a topic which a lot of people don't want to come up with. So my question to you is, how would we project the trauma of the transitory phase during the COVID-19 so that it creates an impact?
How do we, sorry, what was the question? How do we
project the trauma through the transitory phase of COVID so that it creates an impact?
I think एक तो मुझे ना ये नहीं लगता कि जो ना mental health is, for example, a lot of people keep saying that it's a relatively new thing, that only this generation is going through it, etc., etc. I think every generation has gone through mental health issues. They just didn't have the words for it. When I talk to I think every one of us growing up, I'm sure that all of us in our homes have seen our parents in, different situations of which we now can actually identify our mental health traumas. You may have seen parents crying, you may have seen them really upset, you may have seen them really angry. All of that is related to mental health. It's just that अगर 70s में कोई पेरेंट्स को जाके बोलता था कि मुझे जो ना मेरा मूड खराब है, या फिर आई एम वेरी सैड, आई डोंट वांट टू गो टू कॉलेज, उनको एक थप्पड़ पड़ता था खींच के, बोलते कि तुम चुपचाप कॉलेज जाओ, ऐसा कुछ नहीं होता, मूड खराब क्या होता है, हमारे जमाने में कोई ऐसा बोल भी नहीं सकता था, एंड व्हिच इज व्हाई योर पेरेंट्स आल्सो देन उनके साथ जो हुआ है वो तुम्हारे साथ करेंगे, वो बोलेंगे, तुम बोलोगे जो ना मुझे डिप्रेशन है, एंड दे लाइक डिप्रेशन तो इट्स अ फॉरेन टर्म, देयर इज नो सच थिंग एज डिप्रेशन इन इंडिया. ये सिर्फ अंग्रेजों को होता है, white people have depression, but the problem is, it's just that all of these things have existed for the longest time without us having, even right now we don't have actual vocabulary, and when I say vocabulary, while there might be Hindi words, आप मानसिक स्वास्थ्य बोल सकते हो, mental health को, at the same time you don't have it in an accessible way. It's not part of our lingo, it's not part of our colloquial terms, so when you say that I am sad, when you say I'm depressed, that's a very specific, we should not say it casually, but I'm saying that if you actually have clinical depression, for example, and you say I'm depressed, and you want to talk to your families about this and have this conversation, आप क्या बोलोगे अगर आप अभी लोकल लैंग्वेजेस यूज कर रहे हो, रीजनल लैंग्वेजेस यूज कर रहे हो, देयर इज नो वर्ड फॉर इट. द वर्ड यू यूज इज कि मैं दुखी हूं, मेरा मूड खराब है, ऑल ऑफ दिस. बट आपके अगर मार्क्स खराब आते हैं तब भी आप दुखी होते हो, ब्रेकअप होता है तब भी दुखी होते हो, है ना, बट डिप्रेशन हो गया तब भी दुखी हो, तो फिर देन इट्स लाइक मुझे आज चाय गर्म नहीं मिली तो मैं दुखी हूँ, बट एट द सेम टाइम डिप्रेशन इज दुखी हूँ, तो इट्स द you have one word of dukh being used for the smallest and the largest of things. So the problem and challenge that we face in mental health is far deeper than a challenge of just kind of being able to talk about it. It is also the fact that we don't have the words to talk about it. So first and foremost, we need to find words in and now what is finally happening, thankfully, is that people are using English words of depression and anxiety in families and saying there is a thing like depression, there is a thing like anxiety. But वो भी समझाना ना बहुत मुश्किल होता है यार. Anxiety की बात करोगे आप, तो बेचैनी हो रही है. अब बेचैनी हो रही है तो बेचैनी आपको तभी होती है कि कि अगेन आई डोंट नो आई एम यूजिंग चाय रिलेटेड एनालॉजीज, बट बेचैनी हो रही है कि चाय मेरी टाइम पर नहीं बन रही है, उबर नहीं आ रहा वगैरह वगैरह. दैट आल्सो बेचैनी हो सकती है. मैंने कुछ खाना बनाया जोमेटो से, वो भी नहीं आ पा रहा, तो ये क्या है, मुझे भूख लग रही है, बेचैनी हो रही है. ऑल ऑफ दिस आल्सो इज बेचैनी. And at the same time, when you are worried about somebody's, you've had a terrible day at the office, you've gone through, you've seen some terrible piece of news, anything, that also is bechani. But how can you express anxiety? There is no words, that to distinguish between कि छोटी सी चीज जो आपको फर्क पड़ रही है कि I can't sleep at night because of a big day tomorrow, which is a regular kind of anxiety everybody has, to the fact for the last 3 months I have had sleepless nights because I have anxiety as a clinical disease. So there is, we need to start understanding and realizing that, mental health is there's so much that we don't even understand right now. We're just still scratching the surface of what mental health is, and how to project or process this and in impactful ways. I think again, you all are writers, you all are poets, you all are folks that who can use the power of the written word. I think the answer is very simple, just by talking about it, and talking about lived experiences. Again, one of the reasons why it's taken so much time for this to be a huge part of our vocabulary or our life is that there is so much stigma around mental health ना, कि lived experience कोई बोल ही नहीं पाता, कोई बता ही नहीं पाता कि मेरे साथ आप ये बोलो कि डिप्रेशन हर जगह है, बट ये नहीं बोल पाओगे कि मेरे साथ भी I have also gone through it. There are so many, again, unfortunately, and trigger warning, I know this is a tough topic to talk about, but in India, so many, every single day I'm reading, every single week I read a story about student suicides. There is so much pressure that students in India and our country are going through. There's this pressure that has always existed. I don't know what is the pressure in, universities like yours, but I know as an engineer, I know engineering colleges के अंदर तो बहुत ही हमारे तो मुझे, people used to joke about it, and कि अरे वो room देखा है तो room पे ना, just make sure you don't get that room. Why? उस room में भूत है. भूत कैसे? अरे वहाँ पर ना एक लड़के ने suicide कर लिया था. You would joke about this at that time, and then you will like, अच्छा ये है, and then बाद में जाके realize करो, this has happened in the same college you have been in, the same floor you have been in. People used to joke about that, and it's not a joke, it's serious. People are doing these terrible, students are taking these terrible steps, and there is no resource available. मैंने पढ़ा है IISc Bangalore, it is one of the highest, most well-known, well-regarded institutions in the country. It is just so ridiculous. They have decided that the answer to students committing suicide is remove the fans from their rooms. Fan नहीं होंगे तो लड़के जो ना, whoever, any student is not going to do something terrible. Look at the way that our authorities think about mental health. They think the problem is fans, availability of fans. Instead of having conversations, instead of having mental health professionals come in, having honest expression, instead of having safe spaces created in campuses where students can go and express themselves, instead of having counselors coming inside, their answer is keep fans हटा दो. यहाँ पर बॉम्बे के अंदर ना, हमारी बिल्डिंग्स के अंदर ना अलाउ नहीं होता हमको ना छत पे जाना, बिकॉज कहते हैं लोग ना कूद जाते हैं. ये तुम, you are thinking that the answer to all of this is infrastructure. It's not. It's actually structural versus infrastructural. It is so much to do with the fact that we don't have, and we have not created any structures in our daily life, in our homes, in our campuses, in our cities around to have these kind of conversations. So what is the answer to this? Very simple, have conversations, and don't be afraid of putting out your lived experiences online. You have, the internet is the most powerful tool that has ever existed. Of course, it has been misused. It is being misused on a daily basis for misinformation, for hate. कितनी खराब तरीके से लोग यूज करते हैं, but also at the same time it can be used in a very powerful way. It is the power of the internet, of the positivity that internet could have brought, that made people who are terrible realize that they can also use it in another way. But let's not forget that it has power. And that power is available to every one of us, and it is available, as I said, in the palm of your hands. आपको ज्यादा पैसे भी नहीं लगते, फोन सबके पास होते हैं, बेसिक इंटरनेट कनेक्शन सबके पास है आज की दुनिया के अंदर. That's the one thing, you are the first and only generation that has something in common. No generation before the Gen Z has had anything. No generation of Indians. Think about it genuinely. इंडिया में ना कोई भी जनरेशन नहीं है Gen Z से पहले ना जिनका कुछ भी कॉमन है. You can't across the different landscapes, geographical landscape, economic landscape, caste, you name anything, color of skin, body type. There is not one thing that you can say as an identifying feature of something that young Indians have in common, apart from the fact that they call themselves Indians. But right now, there is something that almost, I would say, 90% of young Indians have in common, which is that all of you have access to the mobile phone. Even like the person with the lowest economic background has a mobile phone in their hand because they needed to survive life. It's become roti kapda makan mobile phone hona hi hai sabke paas. Even the poorest of poor folks have it because they needed to survive. And when you have a mobile phone, that means you have power. And you have power, it is about how you're going to use that power. And I think that the greatest thing that you can do with that power is vulnerable. Is be vulnerable. I think that we always considered in our world vulnerability as a weakness. I think, that's not true at all. I think vulnerability is the greatest strength possible. You don't even have to be angry to make a point. You only have to be honest. You have to be raw, you have to be authentic, you have to speak from your heart, and you have to be vulnerable. अगर आप दिल से लिखोगे ना मेरे साथ ये हो रहा है, this is what I've gone through, this is what I'm feeling, talk about, and I know that this is not, I'm not talking about capitalizing your trauma, but I'm talking about talk about it. Let people know what you've gone through. I feel like, again, it disappoints. Again, I'm sorry, I'm going for so many tangents, but like, Jhaveri, we have worked on COVID, volunteers, the whole volunteers program. We have seen trauma in front of our eyes on a day-to-day basis for 3 months. वो 3 महीने खत्म हो गए, लोग जाके अपनी जिंदगी जीने लग गए. Who was held responsible? Who was, held accountable? Nothing. People have died all around us. We have seen on a daily basis hundreds of messages saying this person's died, this person. What has happened afterwards? Nothing. They've gone back and lived our lives as if nothing has happened. 2 महीने वही लोग 3 महीने बाद पार्टी जाके कर रहे हैं, मास्क नहीं पहन रहे, अच्छा ओमिक्रॉन हो गया, कोई टेंशन नहीं है. And I think one of the biggest reasons for that is very few people have taken the time during that time to talk about their experiences, to genuinely talk about this is what I went through. This is what my family has gone through. This is what I've seen. This is what I've heard. If every person who's gone through something terrible would talk about their experience, now people would be forced to take accountability. So there is a lot of power in telling your stories, in being vulnerable, in putting out your lived experiences online. And I think that's the way that, whether it's mental health, whether it's any other topic under the sun, I think that's how you normalize these tough, stigmatic problems in the world that we live in.
While we are talking about trauma and we're talking about projecting it, this was a very national question in regards to India itself about the transitory phase of COVID. So on an international level, we have several areas of conflict, like Palestine, we have Afghanistan, we have a lot of writers and journalists in the audience, and we have seen the media outlets, the way they portray the situations in these countries, in these area of conflicts, is a way of romanticizing them. And that is actually, sorry to say, so disgusting. And you have been a teacher of journalism yourself. So it would be a first-hand advice from you if you could guide these students in the audience on how to portray these areas of conflicts, the native trauma of these people, without romanticizing them in a very raw form.
It's a tough question.
Thank you.
See, as you said, I was a professor for 7 years. I was teaching news reporting and journalism to Jai Hind College in Mumbai. And I mean, the basis of that was really ridiculous. I was a journalist in Hindustan Times for 2.5 years, and after that, again, हमारी country the education system इतना flawed है कि तुम्हें degree भी नहीं करनी, तुम्हें engineer की degree करके you must have just spent 2.5 years in Hindustan Times, and you would allowed to be taught, you would be allowed to teach journalism, without any degrees, any qualifications, but that's just how it is. But honestly, that's the time that changed my life. The fact, 7 years of having conversations with students has made me who I am as a person. So I'm actually very grateful. Um, One of the things that I used to do in my first class, and it was always the fun way for me to. I was the cool professor. I tried very hard to be. So when I say cool cheeze karta tha, which now when I look back and I'm just like embarrassed about. But I used to have like first class ke andar na, I would first class, first would be introduction, second class ke andar, the first thing I'd say is everyone open your notebooks. And people would open a notebook. I'll take a pen and I'm going to tell you the most important lesson of journalism that you ever need to learn. And people will be like, matlab kya gyan fekunga main? And then my exact words would be, no one, they write no one, gives, they write gives a shit about your opinion. That was my first and most important lesson of teaching in my class. Your opinion as a journalist does not matter. You are a reporter. You are here to report facts. You are not here to make commentary. You are not here to, as Juveria said, to romanticize what is happening. You are not here to talk about what you think about what is happening. You are here to report what is happening. And that is the most important lesson, I would say, even though I wrote it in this very funny way and said it in this very funny way, but that is genuinely what I still feel is the most important, tenet of journalism. No one should give a shit about your opinion, except that, of course, now we live in a world where every journalist there's no journalists, they're only commentators right now. Journalists तो है ही नहीं हमारी country के अंदर, कहाँ है journalists? सब commentary कर रहे हैं, and I feel like now a lot of folks are forced to do commentary, because factual journalism is, not taken seriously. So now, because commentary has become the norm, a lot of folks who were actually just factual journalists and were doing good reporting had to make sure they also become commentators, so that their facts are heard. Because if their facts are being reported only as facts, they're not going to be heard. Right now, every young person in the country is actually watching, getting their news from Instagram or Twitter. Then nobody's watching news channels. Nobody's going on the news websites. Paper koi nahi padh raha. It's really sad that YouTubers and Instagram influencers are what people are watching and hearing to kind of figure out what do I think about these things. But that's exactly what these people are saying. They are telling you how to think. And that's what journalism is supposed to be. Journalism is about making you think, not telling you what to think. And that's the essential difference. But वो है ही नहीं हमारा. Everything is biased right now. Everything, there are दो sides तो मतलब है ही नहीं. हर चीज की एक ही side है यहाँ पर ना. Every journalist has a color. Now, while I say this, I recognize that I now live in a world where there is such active misinformation right now. And the ways of consuming journalism and the ways of consuming news has changed so drastically that I don't even know what the tenets of journalism should be. Like, you can't say, okay, now, as a batch, you should only be covering the facts and not be worried about, whether it gets, whether anybody reads it or not. You have to care. Because what is the point of you going and doing journalism if nobody is going to care about what you're saying? Which does not mean that you have to go and color your facts in a certain way or make sure that you are presenting misinformation to catch people's attention. But you have to adapt to the mediums that young people are using to for news. Whether that means अभी आपको news reels में देनी है तो reels में दो आप. अगर आपको न्यूज स्टोरीज पे डालनी है करना पड़ेगा. अगर आपको फीड पे 4 पॉइंट डाल के करना है वो करना पड़ेगा. न्यूज़लेटर भेजना पड़ेगा. So everybody has to find a way to make sure that whatever you are working on or reporting is accessible, because otherwise the problem is the biggest problem in our world right now is that the people who are the most ill-informed are louder than everybody else. That's the biggest problem. The people who have the worst things to say are shouting these things out. And the people who have facts on their side, the people who have, empathy on their side, the people who have logic on their side are too polite to counter it. And that politeness, unfortunately, is making sure that our world has become loud now. Unless you are screaming, nobody's hearing you. And I don't know what is, I mean, I wish there was a simple answer to this. I don't think there's a simple answer to this. I can say, yes, तुम लोग ना अपना सर नीचे रख कर जो है सिर्फ अच्छा काम करो और सब ठीक हो जाएगा. मुझे नहीं लगता that's the, honestly, I don't think that's going to work anymore. You need to be, I mean, as an example, a Ravish Kumar who has to get into, commentary. Until he gets into commentary, no matter what he says, which is factual, fact-based, कोई सुनता ही नहीं है. He has to write a book right now saying this is what's happening in the world, and people have to, he has to become a personality, which also means that maybe all of you will also have to be. Your face and your identity will have to be the thing that people trust. And that's when they start reading your words. Maybe they care about you more than the words. And that's why they care about the words. You have to make sure that the words are correct and they're responsible and they're not biased and they're coming from a place of truth. At the same time, you also have to try to ensure that people do care about what you have to say. Because if they don't care about it, they're not going to care about your words. So it's a very tricky place to be in, honestly, and I wish there was a simple answer to this. There really isn't, and of course, there are times where journalists get, biased with, on even though the most righteous of journalists, the most most logical, most well-informed of journalists, even they end up giving commentary right now. So it's very hard for me to say ki ye karo ya ye mat karo. I just feel like, I think the most important thing is that the truth reaches as many people as possible. How do you ensure that? How do you ensure that, whether it is, as I said in the previous answer, whether it is through you putting out your lived experience, whether it is you being honest and telling your stories in a way that is content, or it is telling the truth in a way that is, reportage, but like such well done reportage, or it is becoming a personality yourself, where you stand for a certain moral code that people care about. Where then the words that you say are being seen because people care about your moral code. But and ideally that's not how it should have been. Ideally it should just be ki acha kaam karo, write the truth, write it in an unbiased manner, and the world will notice. I think that we are, and very sorry to say, very very well past that stage, where the misinformation has become so loud and it is so in your face that we need to get louder with the truth to counter it. So yeah, that's my opinion. I wish again I had a easier, simpler, better answer to this, but yeah, this is what I've been thinking of over the last many days.
That was a very enlightening answer. The thing is, there is a specific thing in journalism which happens, and it's called gatekeeping the voice of the oppressed. And it's only certain people who have the voice, and when they use it, the message gets across. But then they don't come from a place of conflict. They don't come from a position of oppression. They're in a very, very privileged state, as you can say. So when they speak for the oppressed, it's meant to happen. It's bound to happen that they will add in a few of their opinions and it gets the message across. There are very few people who are listened to. So these oppressed voices, as we call them, how should they rise up to make an impact globally?
But you've actually said it absolutely. Everything I would have said, you've already said it on your own, right? That I don't think it's about how, it's about when, because we've just been waiting. Now the thing is now, and I'll give an example of the anti-caste movement. That now for the last 2 years has taken a lot of, has become very coordinated online, and I think it is, it's loud, but I think that loudness is necessary. It's loud and proud. It calls out people. I don't, in an ideal world, that is not how it should happen. In an ideal world, we should not have your voices being heard only because you are screaming. That is not how it should be. But in the world we live in, and the place of the time in which we live in right now, until you are coordinated in your efforts, until you are loud in your efforts, until you are putting all your resources together to make sure people are hearing you, people don't hear you. Now, and which is I'm saying earlier, there was gatekeeping was there earlier because everything, power was centralized. The internet has decentralized power. Social media has decentralized it. Of course, people
But
who
there
have
are
far more.
repercussions.
Sorry?
There are repercussions if they
Correct.
boldly say up what they want to. There are repercussions, and that's why they
Absolutely.
hesitate from putting up their words.
Absolutely. And hence, which is I'm saying coordinated. The reason I use the word coordinated is because there is power in numbers. There is power in community. There is power in a bunch of people coming together and saying that if you're together, if one person is speaking, there is, then, you can target that one person. If hundreds of people are speaking, how many people are you going to target? And that's what it's all about. It's about coming together in every movement in the world, whether it's Black Lives Matter, and again, international movement is, look at Black Lives Matter. I think the best example of an oppressed community, using a hashtag in the most non-violent, the most peaceful way possible, starting a hashtag that has the most, which has said everything that needed to be said, Black Lives Matter. And that hashtag has become a global movement. It's become a revolution. People across the world have come together for it. And it started with one person tweeting, one Black woman tweeting on the internet saying Black Lives Matter. And so there is power in numbers, there's power in community, and that's what, as I said, the power now is decentralized. You can now, as anybody today, anywhere in the world, can use the power of the internet in a way to make an impact. If you put your truth out, if one person is putting their truth out, absolutely they can get targeted. But if hundreds of people are putting their truth out, how can you get targeted? Because then you know that there is truth in what is being said. Because one person's truth can be a question mark, but 100 people saying the same truth, you know that it is fact. And that's where you need to, and which is, I'm saying, that misinformation, on the other hand, is actually using the power in numbers. They are using money to put in and putting that. There are so many of these, IT cells that have cropped up, where you have coordinated attacks. Now there are news articles that have come that there are softwares being used to coordinate attacks on journalists in our country, to coordinate attacks on civilians in our country. There are spy softwares being used to find out there is technologies being used in the most vile ways right now, most nefarious ways to stop people from speaking up, which is why you actually need to find a way of speaking up even more and be even louder, but do it together. I think that's the thing that we need to now understand about it. I think, like, एक इंसान बोल रहा है, of course there is a problem, but if there's and why not? And you don't even have to be angry. I feel like there is also, I think there's a lot of power in just honesty. Anger is important. Anger is necessary many times. Anger against institutions, I think, is valid and just as well. But I feel like, a lot of us, and again, I'm not speaking in specific to a question you've asked, I'm speaking very broadly. I feel like we get lost in getting angry against people who are born out of institutions. We need to dismantle institutions. We need to dismantle systems of oppression. And the only way that can happen is in large numbers with honesty. I genuinely feel like, vulnerability, honesty, lived experiences, stories being put out there, and that's the power of the internet, right? You put an honest story out there, you see the way it goes by. You see the number of people who share it. You see the number of people who get moved by it. And I feel like that is true power. आप कुछ ऐसा बोलकर बताओ कि that people can't refute because it is coming from your real lived experience. And if hundreds of people say that same thing, how can you ignore that? And that's what the Black Lives movement has done internationally. The Black Lives movement has made sure that under that one hashtag, there are hundreds and thousands and millions of stories that have come together. And that's why that it has gone from one tweet to a hashtag to a movement to a revolution. What is that in India? And again, I was giving the example of the anti-caste movement because now I can see how coordinated it is. I can see that there are several people from across the country who are coming together and saying, like, you need to hear our voices. Our voices have been, of course, you also need faces of that. You also need some people to be vocal about it. So you have your, Dilim Mandal, you have your Suresh Yengde, you have, younger folks like Sankul and Shrishti and all of these folks who are trying very hard to, have their voices heard, and they're most unafraid, which I think is just incredible and so courageous. But yeah, the power is always in numbers. So and honesty in numbers and vulnerability in numbers can genuinely change the world.
That is really true in many cases if we look at it, whether it's globally or nationally. And when we are conveying a story in one form to another, whether it's fiction, whether it's non-fiction, whether it's journalism, or even in general cases, if you're listening to someone, there is this empathetical action which you have highlighted in all of your talks when it's based in mental health and a lot of other stuff, and that is called listening. So in short, the my question to you is ki, how to efficiently listen and convey.
Um, I think I feel like listening is extremely important. I mean, I've always said that, but I feel like I need to add another context of who are you listening to, and what are you listening to. I feel like
Whether
so
you're
much.
listening,
Sorry.
there's a lot to say to it because it's a very broad question. But I would narrow it down to whether you're listening to convey a story of native trauma, or you're in general listening to someone and you have to put it up somewhere.
Yeah.
So how would you efficiently listen?
Exactly, and I was actually coming to that answer only, which is that I think now we need to also a broader answer, to because I'm kind of trying to go in basis the previous questions you asked. A broader sense right now is there is just so much clutter on the internet right now, right? There's so many voices, so much being said all the time. Hard type of everywhere somebody is trying to have their voice heard. Every single platform, every single thing. Now, is every one of them worth listening to? That's a big question, right? Because it's now the attention economy. Your time is there is literally an economy around trying to get your time and get your attention. From every social media app to every OTT platform to every every single app on your Zomato is making food videos, and saying कि तुम Zomato app पे खाना खाना order करने आते हो तो तुम्हारी वीडियो भी देख कर जाओ, because they want your attention, they want you to be there for longer. Amazon, that started as an app for shopping, started making web shows and movies, and now it's going to Oscars. I mean, everybody, like Instagram started as a picture app, has now become a video platform and a real platform, because TikTok had come and gotten everyone's attention. They realized that they need to come down to 30 seconds as 1 minute, and that's how they do, right? So in an economy and in a culture where everybody is trying to get your attention, I think a lot of it again comes down to who is worth the attention and who should you pay this attention to. And so I would say that listening is extremely important. I think, let me start very generally. uh, uh, this is one of the 2 or 3 tenets of my life. I think being kind, having empathy, listening to others is 3 or 4 things that I genuinely wholeheartedly believe in. That instead of being the person to speak, always be the listener first. Try and hear before you say something. Try and make sure that you're not always the person to put yourself out there, because there's a lot of power in listening. We have divided our world a lot into us and them, and because we don't know the story of the person who is, so to speak, quote unquote them. The moment you start hearing those stories, you start recognizing that there's actually more that unites us than that divides us. You realize that actually जब stories एक दूसरे को सुनने शुरू करो ना, which is also why I believe in the power of stories. When you start hearing people out, you realize actually we are all the same, but we have just created these labels and these barriers of us and them. And so much of this can be solved if we spend a lot of time in listening to each other, just hearing stories, just asking important questions, about who the person is, what their life has been like, what their journey has been like, before, in our mind, just putting labels and then dismissing people, or reducing people to one opinion you've seen on the internet, reducing people to one thing that you've heard about them, or one name that you have seen, or one kind of a identifier you have put on them because of the way they look or the way they sound or what their name signifies. And I think that's just extremely important as we go along. Like, don't judge people on the basis of these man-made labels. Try and listen to who they are beyond what you can see obviously, and that is the tenet that I have in my life overall. But I would say that it's also now become very important on where are you giving your time attention to, who are you listening to. because most voices, as I said now, are actually loud, mean, angry voices of unkind people. So if you're going to listen to, and again, I for example, and I'm just giving you examples, Joe Rogan, who is one of the most popular YouTubers, I mean, one of the most popular podcasters in the internet, but is now coming under fire because of massive misinformation that he puts out in his, podcast. That of course, there might be episodes of him that can change your life. Maybe there are episodes of his that are giving you like enough and more to think about. At the same time, he now has enough. He comes from a place of power, and he comes from a place of privilege, which is white male privilege and white male power. Why are you continuing? Are you sure that he's the person you want to listen to? You have heard people like him all your life. Where do you want to put your attention to now? And I think those are the questions that we need to answer. That who are you listening to? Now, there are so many, I can see that people of, many genders over here. And, but as, for example, someone who is identifies as a man, right? I want to make sure that I'm not constantly listening only to men, because that's what we have all, patriarchy has ensured that we're always listening to men. How do I listen to women more? Because that's important. It's not only important to listen to people who are exactly like you, but it's more important to listen to people who are unlike you, who are not of your privilege, who don't have the, straight man, upper class privilege that I have. That's very important to me right now. I've literally started a podcast right now where I'm trying to listen to young people, because I just feel like there's so many incredible voices among young people that I just want to hear out. I want to know the kid who has stories from different parts of the country and different lives that they have led. Because my opinion is shaped only by a certain kind of loud voice and information that is out there. And it's always patriarchal. It's always coming from a man's perspective and a powerful man's perspective. Our entire world is shaped from the vision and perspective of men. How do we ensure that we go beyond that? If we truly want to bring change, if we truly want to listen, we need to first identify who are we not listening to. Are we listening to other genders enough? Are we listening to women? Are we listening to people from the queer community? Are we listening to people from oppressed castes, oppressed classes, oppressed communities? Are we listening to people who are who look nothing like us, who sound nothing like us, who don't dress like us, who don't behave like us, who don't have the color of our skin, who may not, and who don't have the privilege of us? That's important. So I would say that, specifically, of course, broadly, of course, listening is important. But I'd like to add now that the older I get, the more I recognize that it's not just broadly listening that's important. It's also deciding who you're listening to and where you're spending that time. Because, again, and one of the reasons that, like, there's so many influencers right now, yaar, or wo itna, matlab, you see somebody, and again, I don't want to take shots, I don't want to like attack people, but I'm just kind of saying, like, you will have somebody who is, for example, and I'm just randomly saying a food influencer, right? Okay, who will talk about food, great at chef, great at food, great at everything. Suddenly this person is saying that, cloth mask to pehn rahe ho, yeah, I mean, say cloth mask pehna karo, koi tension nahi hai, etc. Because this person might have 2 million followers, and this person, without having the medical understanding of what should be said about COVID, is not giving you COVID information. And because you trust this person for being a food influencer, you also think I should take my medical advice from this person. That's where the problem is. So again, who are you listening to? Who are you listening to? For medical advice, are you going to listen to the chef who you follow, who is probably a great voice? Or are you going to listen to, somebody who's known person in that field and saying that you may never have heard that person before? That person may not be an influencer, may not have 1 million followers on Instagram, and yet what they're saying has made the most important thing for you. So it all comes down now to choices, and those choices that we make as in our lives, and particularly I think for you all as young people, is very important. You've chosen to hear me right now. I'm really grateful and appreciative that you feel like I should be heard. But I am, again, there is a perspective I have. You must find out perspectives that are also very unlike mine. I'm not saying, I mean, of course, I hope that you hear people who are not assholes. Typically try not to hear assholes much. But at the same time, hear people who don't come from the same level of privilege that I do. It's very easy for me to sit over here in my AC room, in my, cushy job, never having faced beyond a point of time, beyond a reasonable point of time, any kind of operation in my life, to say, "Achha, ye karo, wo karo, wo karo, ye karo." Mujhe itna nahi pata. I am just responding to questions from my opinion. I have never lived the lives that you have lived. Please hear and make sure that the people that you start following or think are credible come from places of lived experience that you recognize, that you relate to, that you believe in, who you identify with, who you genuinely think can, if you listen to, can, maybe there's something that I say that might be helpful to you. But there's a lot that I will say, that I would say, just make sure that there are diverse voices, collective voices, important voices that you hear beyond just me being, whatever, a certain amount of influence on the internet. That's not why I should be heard. And I really hope that that's not why anyone ever hears me, because I have 37,000 followers on Instagram. That's the first reason to hear anybody, especially me.
No, like the words of advice and guidance, and from your perspective, which has been given, has been enlightening to many students. I'm pretty sure about it. And as we are nearing the end of our session, I have one last question for you, and it's out of context. It will be really abrupt. And you have taken a lot of interviews. You have interviewed Shah Rukh Khan. You've interviewed Ayushmann Khurrana. You have interviewed so many people with big personalities. So my question to you will be, as an interviewer, this specific interview which you have sat through, patiently bearing with me, how would you give your advice for this interview to have been prepared in a much more better way?
Now you say that I'm like, patronizing you, but it's not true. I think Jiveri, you've asked some beautiful questions. I don't think that, for me, I don't think I'm in any place to kind of judge or rate somebody. Honestly, I think if these questions were the ones that are coming from your experience, your life, your POV, your heart, I think that's how it should be. Ask questions that you want to genuinely, that you're curious about. Ask things to others that you want to know, not just because they make for great questions. There are no great questions. I think there's great curiosity. I think there's great learning, but there's no great questions. Always, that's what I've always conducted every one of my interviews in a way where I'm just curious to know. I genuinely want to know. Okay. And you'll see that you'll hear that in my podcast also. I say this a lot, and I realize I started saying this a lot. Where I say, I'm curious, but I'm genuinely curious. I'm genuinely curious to know something about somebody, and I ask that. So I'm curious to know why you do, because it is my curiosity that drives me to find out more about people. It is my quest for constantly wanting to learn more, constantly having an understanding of mujhe itna nahi pata. I think one of the worst and most the worst thing we can do as people as we grow older is thinking mujhe bahut pata hai. Kuch nahi pata. किसी को कुछ नहीं पता. You can be, I am 35 right now, and I genuinely don't know. I know very little about the world right now. Every day I read a book and I'm just like, oh my God, how dumb am I? Whatever it is. Every day there's something that opens my eyes. Every day there's a conversation I have. Every day there's something that I hear and learn about the world that genuinely blows my mind, and I'm like, oh my God. And I think that's the place. I mean, it's worked for me. But I genuinely think that, if we reach a place where you think that I know enough, I think that's where you're going wrong. I think constant learning, constantly trying to better yourself, constantly trying to just be curious about knowing others. There's this wonderful quote from, it's from a poet, but I saw it in one of my favorite shows, Ted Lasso. Be curious, not judgmental. I think it's just everything that I would say overall, and I think that's the way you should conduct interviews. That's the way that, and if there's anything that I would say, and I think that's on me and not on you, it would have been that I would have loved to hear a little bit more of your point of views also between the, the questions, purely because I feel like every, interview should ideally be an, conversation, because, this idea of interview also, of course, if you're speaking to somebody who's in a position of great power and having and you have a limited amount of time as a journalist, so maybe you are able to only have 10 questions and you have to ask 10 questions. But when you're having a conversation like this, I think it should be a conversation. I think it would also help me a lot more when I'm hearing you in between all the monologues that I'm giving, because then I'll also take something back, and I will be able to be like, acha, something that I learned today that I probably did not. So that was the only feedback that I'd give. That feel free and feel and be empowered enough to say what's on your mind as well, so that it's more of a conversation, and they can be learning two ways. But otherwise, I mean, it was great, lovely questions. I'm so glad that I could do this. I know that your time is up, but I know somebody had written over here, they have a question, so I'm very happy to answer that. If there's any other questions, I have another.
Then we go ahead.
Very happy to answer questions if anybody else has. But thanks, Javeria, for conducting this fabulous session.
I think we have a question from Darshana, I guess. Darshana, can you hear me?
Somebody had written, yeah.
Darshana?
Is she here?
She's here. I think her mic is on, but cannot hear us. She's left the meeting. We'll take questions because we're not actually ready for taking questions, but since they wanted.
Yeah, anybody has any questions, please feel free to ask.
Darshana
Can you
is here.
hear me? Am I audible?
Yeah,
Yes.
Darshana.
I'm so sorry. I think I dropped out because of internet connection. So hello, sir. It was a very insightful session, but I slightly disagree with you, and I'm sorry. I was just too
Please
prompted
completely disagree with me. Don't need to slightly
too
disagree.
prompted to ask this and also comment, but I thought I'll wait towards the end of it. So
Well,
I'm totally on board with you for the fact that hashtags and people uniting together for a cause work. However, okay, so recently there were 9 million students from Patna who made a hashtag trend, but it was suppressed.
Yeah.
And then you also have the second thing, that there are mass movements, but then people, especially people from the marginalized communities, people who can be targeted because they're othered in the society already, the kind of society that we're in. So they're othered already, and they are being targeted. Whether you say that it was Disha Ravi last year who was targeted for literally circulating a toolkit, or whether it is Umar who's still in jail. It's been over 500 days, and it's such a loss. It's such a loss to lose such a person. But then on the other hand, we have Kanhaiya Kumar, who is getting a head start in his political career. And I am not against him or anything, but I would just like to ask that, people from Bollywood, and I'm not attacking again. People
No,
from
attack.
Bollywood-
It's okay, it's all good.
no, I don't mean to. But all I want to say, because you mentioned Black Lives Matter, and when people from Bollywood, they participate in the hashtag that Black Lives Matter, but they don't comment anything about the fact that students don't have livelihood. Students are protesting because they don't have jobs. Farmers are protesting because they are being sold off to private companies. Then women are suppressed because we it's just getting bad for us. And I'm all for uniting and coming together, but honestly, in the country, do you really think that this can happen? And for something like a Black Lives Matter to trend, it is because people have realized in America and all over the world that this is what has to happen for us to progress as a society. But when hashtags can be suppressed because we have that kind of a technology, and the fact that the current government knows how to play the technology well, they know how to use the visual culture, they know how to attack, they know who to attack. I just want to know how do we combat that?
So Sahil has already given a thumbs up for your question. So I will add to Sahil's thumbs up as another 2 thumbs up. Brilliant question, Darshana, and I'm so glad that this is why I said I want to hear you all also. You all are so brilliant. You always have something to say that I will take something away from. No, it's a absolutely valid question, and it's a very pertinent question, especially again, as I said, in the context of the time we live in, the government we live with, and what's happening in the world at large. I feel like, so I know the 9 million tweets that was suppressed. I know about that, obviously. But I don't know if you've seen, there was also this BBC interview of one young person I
Yeah,
don't know if you've seen
I
that,
saw that.
yeah, you've seen that also, right? And like most of us may have seen that because it was one voice. It was one young person passionately talking, and he spoke for about 10 minutes or more, maybe, about like, answered every question and answered with complete honesty and without getting angry and just complete passion about ye ho raha hai. This is what is happening with young people. This is why what's happening with the hashtags. This is why we went on the road. This is what happens when you go on the road, etc., etc. Now that video has been circulated. Now I've got it in different WhatsApp groups. I've seen it on Twitter. I've seen it on Instagram. People have sent it across to me. I've seen it. I've shared it. And you've also seen it. And see, that is the power I'm talking about. Of course, they're going to, in the way that the world is now, and, media and content is power, for whatever it's worth, which is also why I said earlier, right? I said that, great, it's important to be a truthful journalist, but it's also probably just as important in the context of the world today to be a powerful personality. You need to have these numbers. The reason that, again, I'll give you an example. I don't really go behind, a certain number on my social media. I can't like work in that sense. कि मैं हर रोज कुछ लिखूं. But when I have something to say, I mean, I have a certain, like I have a couple of rules for my social media. One, which is that, speak when you have something to say, and not just because something needs to be said. So I am not, someone who always just needs to say something. I always speak when I have something that I feel like I offer. Add to the conversation, not to the noise. Am I adding to a conversation? Am I just saying the same thing over and over again? But I would say that for you all, as young people, I think you should give your opinion on everything. I think you should go online and, put out your voices on every single issue. Why? Because you need to build that identity. You need to build that power. Of course, try and make sure that it's coming from a place of truth. Try and make sure it's coming from a place of honesty. It's not, it's not irrational. It is not argumentative. It is not just angry for the sake of being angry. You have to try to offer something every time you're saying something, but say it, because those numbers matter. To fight any kind of misinformation and any regime in the world today that uses misinformation as a tool to suppress others. Your voice needs to be louder as well. Your voice and you need to be in a position of power. Again, now I it's not like I don't know Dhruv Rathi in that sense, or Akash Banerjee, for example, or Rana Ayub, Now, of course, Rana Ayub has a very different, being a woman and being a Muslim woman, and, from India, her response is very different. And Dhruv Rathi, given that he's somewhere in, Europe right now, it's much easier for him to talk about. But what is common is that both of them have built the numbers and because they build their numbers, they're being heard. And that's what's common, so of course, Rana Ayub is going through 100 times the, issues that Dhruv Rathi faces. Dhruv Rathi is also getting hate. Rana Ayub is also getting hate. At the same time, the hate is much worse for one person than it is for the other. Absolutely, completely agreed. Yet, the fact that they have numbers is what is making sure that they are at least being heard. And that is why numbers are important. It doesn't matter whether you're Dhruv Rathi, whether you are Rana Ayub, whether you are an Akash Banerjee, whether you're any Ravish Kumar, any other journalist. It matters in today's time that you build your influence to counter the suppression. You need more voices, and which is what I was saying. I don't think like you can suppress one hashtag, but you still can't suppress that one voice of that one kid who will speak to BBC and be so passionate and so articulate and so incredible that his voice is being shared by everybody. But imagine X number of voices like that are being shared all over. Imagine that, if instead of just him, imagine like 1,000 young people also putting out videos and saying this is what they're doing. I'm sure that there's ways to suppress that also, but how long will you suppress it for? If it's a constant, and which is why, I mean, again, the reason I use Black Lives Matter is Black Lives Matter as a hashtag started 10 years ago. The revolution has happened now. It's taken 10 years. It's taken 10 years and many more deaths of young Black people, unnecessarily brutality for years and years and years. And then, because of George Floyd, it rose. But it was a movement that at least sparked and started and took time. The anti-caste movement that's happening online, it's only on the internet right now. There's a lot that needs to be done. There's so much that needs to be done, and there are so many people who are talking about it, actively having these conversations. There are 100 more books, 1,000 more books that need to be written, 100,000 more tweets that need to be made, a million more influencers that need to come up talk about this topic before that it will actually have a larger impact on our society. But I'm saying that it needs to start with you, and it needs to start right now. It needs to start right now. It needs to start with you. It needs to start with everybody. We can always look at it's David versus that, right? Like every oppressive regime in the world will have more resources than you. And at the same time, we have seen, how in the Arab Spring, a bunch of young people used Facebook to bring down, we came together and just did not leave. We've seen the farmers protest. They got what they wanted. They just didn't leave. They said, okay, 8 days, 2 days, you've forgotten about it. They didn't leave. They didn't forget. We forgot it. We don't care about, we cared about it for 3 months, and then we just forgot. But they were there for another 7 months before they were heard. Before they said, okay, chalo, because they just didn't leave. So it's just that it has to be, if you need your voices to be heard, it needs to be, loud. It needs to be everywhere. It needs to be all the time. It needs to be everyone. That's when it will be heard. It will be a collective effort, to have oppressed voices being heard. Now, they don't always need to be angry, is what I've also said. They can also be vulnerable. They can also be passionate, like the BBC young person. He was not angry. He was just factual. He was passionate. He was factual, and he said just truth. And then you will be heard. It won't happen overnight. It won't happen with one hashtag. It won't happen with 10 voices. But over a period of time, with more and more and more young people joining and saying, I need to be heard, I need to be heard, I need to be heard, there is no chance you cannot be heard. You are the India Gen Z are the population in the world. There are more young people in India, than there are anywhere in the world. How can you not hear? And for whatever it's worth, you are going to be the largest voter base for any political party in the country over the next 5 years. If you scream, there is no chance you will not be heard. If you shout, there's no chance you will not be heard. If you constantly put your voices out there, there is no chance you will not be heard. Because where right now you are too young to vote, that's why they're not hearing you. When you're too old to vote, they have no other option. Then you'll have your voices and you'll have your votes, and you can say what happens in the country. So I have no reason that I've also started I literally started a company called Yuvaa because I have faith I genuinely have more faith, optimism, and hope from young people in the country than I have for anything else. Even for myself, even for anybody else, I genuinely feel like if young people are passionate, if they're empowered, if they believe in themselves, there's nothing you all can achieve. But I completely understand it cannot happen at an individual level. It'll have to have a collective level. Individuals can get targeted. Collectives, bring about the revolution. The farmer protests being such a great example right now. You had you had so many farmers come together for such a long time. You don't but to listen to them, and they did it peacefully. They did it, peacefully over months and months and months. But they won, and that's what I was trying to say. But it's a brilliant question, Darshana. Thank you for pointing it out. And I'm glad that you're disagreeing. I think that's one of the most important things of being a young person and being a student, especially a journalism student. You should disagree. Do not.
I come from sociology background actually, so it's like always been curious for me.
Yeah, great. And I'm telling you, this is what we need more. Yeah, हमारे country के अंदर कितने और engineering student आएंगे, who are told that this is the way the world works. We need sociology students, we need art students, we need humanities students, we need journalism students who actually disagree, who speak up and say, no, this is why should I live the world according to your rules when these rules don't work, So I'm so glad that you are speaking up, and I hope everybody else consistently and continuously speaks up. That's the only way we'll be able to bring change. Thumbs up नहीं मिला मुझे.
Sahil bhai, please do the honors.
Sahil gave thumbs up to Darshana's question, but he didn't give a thumbs up to me. I'm very sad now.
You've been getting so many verbal thumbs up since you started speaking.
नहीं, तुमने अभी इस आंसर के लिए नहीं दिया ना, तुमने क्वेश्चन के लिए दे दिया था ना. I was looking, I was like, अब मुझे मिलेगा कि नहीं मिलेगा, पर नहीं मिला. I'm heartbroken.
I would like to request everyone to save the questions. like Nikhil sir, just a preliminary request to you. We have a thing called the AMU Literary Festival.
Yeah.
Okay. And like the invites have not gone out yet, and like there are a lot of things that have to be done. But because this is, with all due respect to all the previous guests that we have had at UDLC, with all due respect to all of them, just because this goes live, like this is one of the most amazing interactive sessions where I've actually glued myself to the screen. I cannot hear you. That was a shy thank you, actually. Yeah. So like as a preliminary request, I'd like to extend an invitation for a panel at the AIM Literary Festival. Obviously the details are yet to follow. We are still on the planning stage. Thus I want to use this place right now so that I can extend that, so we can hear more from you. You can take more questions. The Lit Fest is usually more grueling.
I'd also like to add, have you ever been invited to SR? Because like
LSR, no, I haven't been to LSR. Sorry.
so I think it's time that we invite you there.
Thank you. I've done a lot of campuses, but those are the ho nahi paya, kitna nahi ho paya. My favorite part of my entire year is just being able to have conversations with them.
I'll give you a context behind the invitation that Sabi Bhai has accepted. The information came in the middle of the interview. He was so excited, and he was like, "This is one of the guests that I will be invited for the Lit Fest. You are the first guest that the invitation has been extended to."
This was my audition.
We really hope.
Yeah, kind of.
No, this was not.
So when he was like, no, it wasn't. He's like, yes, of course it was. You think I should have बोला? He's like, पहले देखेंगे नहीं, पहले 40 लोगों को बुलाएंगे, देखेंगे कि नहीं ठीक कि नहीं, उसके बाद ही.
Planned this.
Like we are actually very short of time, but we'll take one last question. Like Abir Aftab has a question.
I think somebody, Abir, said.
Like this will be the last question, please, audiences. Abir, you can, if you're listening to me.
Yes. Good evening, sir, and thank you so much for such a nice lecture.
Thank you.
I wanted to ask something that I personally struggle with a lot. So it's like the issue of facing a massive burnout. And I think this is something that people can relate to more because of COVID, because we didn't have a lot of social activities. So we were all like cooped up in our houses. We took up to social media a lot, and there was just such a vast range of random opinions that came up. One really huge issue with this generation is some really absurd things are being normalized. And there's such tempting narratives that are being built up for really absurd things. And they're becoming digestible. Like people are starting to consider really absurd narratives as valid because some justifications behind it are just, the disguise, the literature behind the justifications is so great. People don't understand that narrative is actually very faulty and it doesn't make any sense. So my point is there's just too much information, and like a massive percentage of it doesn't make any sense. And I'm a dental student, so I've got like a lot of coursework to keep up with. So how do I filter between all of these different opinions? And what I want to say is that it is not the capacity of every person to be a social activist. Every human being is not a social activist. I mean, fine, if something happens, I can speak about it. I could put up a post here and there, or I could read the news, but pretty much nothing is giving me proper information, and I can't always keep up with, debates. And yes, it's my job to educate myself, but it's becoming increasingly hard, and there are way too many narratives. It's almost pointless. And it's like, even when I think about it, I can like see an impending burnout coming my way just thinking about it. I haven't even started researching, just thinking about all the work that needs to be done. It just gives me I know I'm going to have a burnout. So, what's your advice?
I have burnouts every night before going to bed. So I'm with you completely. Hear you, Abir.
I mean, this is literally a problem that everyone is facing, and it is going to culminate into serious conditions because we're facing a massive burnout, and there are no proper solutions to it.
Absolutely. So I've actually, last month only I wrote a couple of pieces actually about this. I wrote about, how we've all gotten super exhausted So I wrote a little bit about that. That it's become. I also wrote about joy of less. How this year I want to not have to not care about so many different things. So please feel free to read that if you get the chance. But also wrote about this thing called performativeness pressure. Which is, I think, one of the leading causes of burnout right now. Which is that what has become, I think, over the last 2 years is it's become a compulsion. It's become a need for so many of us to constantly being performative, on the internet, about to be relevant. So if there's a trending topic, मुझे उस पे बात करनी करनी. If there is a reel शुरू सब लोगों ने कर दिया तो मैं भी करना चाहूँ. If somebody is now talking about finance and NFTs and crypto, I also need to get on this. If somebody is talking about, I don't know, man, there's just so many different things that people talk about right now, and there's so much noise all around us. It becomes very difficult to actually take a step back and be like, what is useful for me? What is something that I care about? What is something that so much of this is just a pressure. Peer pressure hota tha, performativeness pressure. I feel like there is also exam mein log kahenge hota tha algorithm kya kahega. If you're not pleasing the algorithm constantly, are we even living? Are we even doing something in our lives? I think the simple answer to a lot of this is having the power to step away from the internet. I think all of us now, of course,
I do, but that means you're not that informed.
But that's but exactly, that's what you think that it means, but that's not true at all. I think that you can still be informed by reading books. You can still be informed by having conversations with people who are who are well read. You can still be informed by reading a newspaper in the morning. You can still be well informed by just having a close circle of people who are who send you the things that you must kind of need to keep a tab of. I think kitna information, how well informed is well informed? Is there a roof to it? Because I feel like in this point of time, this is exactly what you said. I think that's the crux of the problem. I feel like I feel it too.
It's not articles and events, it's the narrative. Like if I read an article about feminism and I read an article about religion and I read an article about Palestine, it's different people, you give them the same facts and they build a story in their mind, and that narrative is basically what decides their perception in their life. So it's like, who can teach you what the right narrative is? And it's basically no one. Like you need proper mentors. Like just going on the internet or having a few articles sent to you won't take you to the crux of what's the truth behind how the world functions, or what is the crux of the system, and how you can actually go to the core of the system. Because I mean, talking about, okay, mobilize yourself in masses and have debates and do this and do that, they're actually, yes, these actions have power, but they're not ultimately going to cause the change we want. I mean, you need to first know what is the crux of the system, and you won't gain that by just keeping up with articles. Or
I'll tell you what, Abhi. I agree with you in parts. I think that both are important. I feel like problem again coming into algorithm. I think there's no better way to explain it, right? I feel like the world right now just seems to have become 0 and 1. या तो आप 0 हो गए या 1 हो गए. Either you are completely off of everything and being like मुझे फर्क नहीं पड़ता इन चीजों के बारे में, I'm going to care about myself, I don't care about community. Or you have to be in every discussion and understand everything that is happening and know every narrative,
which is not possible.
I don't think that's true, and I don't think it's possible. How, as I said, when you say that you need to be well read, how well read is well read? Can you possibly read all the important books that everybody is talking about? Can you possibly see all the shows that everyone is talking about? Can you possibly read every Twitter thread of every important person on their planet? Can you keep abreast of every trend that is happening? Of course not. You are going to be missing things out. Now the question now for you as a young person is, how much of that are you going to consciously miss out and be okay with? And I think that's where we need to see. I don't know what the problem is. Okay, and this is it's a problem that scares me a lot, right? I feel like all of us, including me, actually, we are the first generation of people that is caught in the internet. the first generation overall. I mean, I am 35. I've been using the internet for about 20 years, 2 decades or whatever. And उससे पहले भी ना शायद एक और decade, 30 साल का internet है. I mean, पूरा सब कुछ मिला 3 decades. That's the only thing we understand. Social media is not even a 15 years old. It is, a decade or so old in a big way. We are right now living in history. We have not had the privilege to step back and see how it is affecting us. 30 years now, 50 years from now, people are going to look back and say, this was the effect and impact of, people hopping onto every trend. And this is the kind of massive burnout it caused. This is the kind of mental health issues that happened because of it, etc., etc. And then maybe your children or your children's children will be able to tell them, okay, this is the way we need to now use the internet. But right now, because we're in it, we don't have the luxury of stepping back, and we feel afraid कि अगर हम लोग step back, if we step back, are we going to miss out? That fear of missing out is the biggest, worst thing I think that has happened because of constant access to the internet. That we are just constantly anxious कि अगर मैंने miss out कर दिया, what am I going to be? Will I be well read enough? Will I be well informed enough? Will I know everything that I need to know? But the answer, Abir, is you still will be, and you can choose. You can choose how much information is important, how much do you want to on a daily basis subject yourself to on the internet. What is enough? There's no conversation about enough in our country, in our world right now. Enough की तो बात ही नहीं होती है, सब और करना है. Hustle culture, everybody is all about hustling all the time. But what is enough? Self-care की बात करते हैं, but self-care also, people think that fairy lights डाल दिया, candles डाल दिया तो उसका self-care हो गया. Self-care, honestly, and self-love, honestly, is the ability to be able to step back and say, you know what, this is not helpful for my mental health, so I'm going to take a step back. It is after volunteers, and Johari, after volunteers for 2.5, 3 months, 2 months, I don't think I've written anything. I have not had the capacity to write. I did not have the emotional capacity to write anything. If you look at my social media posts, and if you just go and look at it, okay, you will see that till volunteers, I'm writing these really emotional posts about, COVID and trauma, etc., etc. And then for like 2 months after that, 1 month I don't write anything, and 2 months after that, I just keep making dumb jokes. I'm writing just absolute ridiculous, bad humor related stuff. Why? Because I was out. My empathy my compassion was done for the year. I'd seen so much trauma in those 3 months of doing volunteers that I did not have the capacity to give my opinion about anything else, about anybody else. Trend chal raha, people have to write. Yeah, I may have something to say about it, but I can't say it right now. And I'm okay with it. The world can do with one less opinion.
You lose the ability to form phrases and words which make sense and which can project your feelings towards an audience that you want.
And I've just been retweeting. Abhi mera nahi hai scope, so I will share. I will retweet. Maybe I'll just step away from the internet and let others take the job. I'm not the only person. I'm not the most important, person and voice on the internet. There are hundreds and several more. And I'm sure that, the world can do without me for 3 months, 4 months, 5 months. And I can also do without the world for this kind of time. But you need to now, I think that needs to be normalized right now. I feel like that it's okay to not have to constantly be hustling. It's okay to not exhaust yourself to the level of burnouts to hop onto every single thread. It is okay to not know about every new thing that happened. मैं ना जानबूझ के NFTs नहीं पढ़ रहा. मुझे नहीं पढ़ना. मैं नहीं पढ़ूंगा. मुझे interest, if at some point I feel like it will add value to my life, then I will read about NFTs, then I'll read about crypto. But you can make 1,000 tweets and throw them at me, but I'm not going to read it. Because I don't
There's actually a term for it. Like, it's called dopamine detox. If you've heard of it, you must have obviously.
Yeah.
That is something that helps a lot for these burnouts.
I feel like everything for us now has become a choice. It's just that we don't have the understanding that we do have choice. That self-awareness is very important. And if you start recognizing that there is choice, that actually you are not actually going to lose out on much if you take breaks for yourself, if you stay out, if you spend more time with yourself. In fact, I'll tell you, the best thing that you will do is take these breaks actively. Ideally we should be able to take breaks on a daily basis, on a weekly basis. But I'm trying to say, like, even phase wise, take breaks, give yourself that time to rest and recover. Give yourself the space to grow. Give respect to your mental health. Give respect to your body. Make sure it's okay if you cannot be part of every activism activity that is happening in the world around. It's okay when you have the scope, when you have the passion, when you're in the right frame of mind. I'm sure you'll be able to do it. But this is a very good question, Abir, and I hope that there's more discussion about this, because I just genuinely, I feel really disappointed that with that and I blame again, not attacking, but I blame a lot of these influencers on the internet who are constantly telling people to, ye karo, ye karo, ye karo. If you're not doing this, you're missing out.
Yeah.
If you're not missing out, without once talking about the fact that not people, they are at a place where they have enough money. कितने पे साहिल का मुझे clap आ गया अब तो, वाह. So इतने पैसे सब लोगों के पास ना, most of the influencers right now have earned a certain amount of money, and now they're not even running their companies. They're sitting in front of a computer and they're just telling you this is how you should be living your life. उन्होंने जी भी नहीं, उन्होंने सब कर लिया है, but अब बैठ के बोलेंगे कि अगर तुम ये नहीं कर रहे हो तो missing out कर रहे हो. But that's just, you need to recognize that all of these people are privileged. They're coming from a place of they are doing this only to grow their clout. This is not being done in your best interest. Your best interest is only something that you can understand, nobody else can. And I'm saying, please be aware of it. If you're talking about burnout, recognize that you have it. Take the steps, whether it is stepping away from the internet, whether it is giving time to your emotion, giving time to your body, being away from this, do whatever possible. But I think that it is genuinely one of the scariest, most important things that we now need to have conversations about and normalize. The ability, the choice of doing less. That choice, I think all of us need to have. And I think both are important. Like Abhi, you said, right? Like it is important for some people to constantly be, talking about things that are difficult to be talked about. And there are also people who should be taking the time to give themselves the space, grow as a person. Maybe you cannot change the world outside, but you can change yourself within. And that's also enough. Sometimes that is enough.
Okay. Sir, I'm so sorry for dragging this out just a little bit more. Can I?
Yeah, please go ahead.
Okay. When you had talked about vulnerability, I just, how you mentioned that you would like to know the views of the other people, aside from the ones you have. I just wanted to say that I had this groundbreaking epiphany when I turned around 21. My uncle, my really close uncle, is a psychiatrist, and I never really used to have conversations with him. But when I was 21, he told me once about his patients, and he said that a massive portion of his patients come because of the disorders they've had from reading novels and from playing video games. And it's basically the nature of the algorithm and what the effect it has on the brain. It's not just about taking a break from the social media. I mean, if you're mature enough at the age of maybe 30, when you have some sort of wisdom, you can consume data and know that, okay, fine, this is just, it's too impractical. And even if I see it every day, I know that this is not going to seep into my real life. That's fine. But especially for the younger generation, there's a need to express themselves and for them to use social media. But at the same time, it is literally a matter of life and death when they actually do open up to social media, and they start, instead of seeking comfort, they can't open up to their society and community for really deep questions. So they open up to the social media, and the narratives and the stories they obtain from there are really dangerous. So that was just my, it was just my, that's just something I would like to add to your.
You're absolutely right. You're absolutely spot on. And that is also why you have the choice, for example, to create a close friends group. You have the choice of creating a Finsta account. You have the choice of, just curating the information that you want. Even on Twitter, you can be following, you can be creating Twitter lists where, where I'm not going to see everything on Twitter. I'm only going to see tweets from these 20 people that I care about and who at this point of time in my mental health are going to be important. So you can curate the experiences that you have on the internet also. But what you're saying about people at 30 being more mature, that's absolutely false. I think 90% of the dumbest people that I've seen in my life have been above the ages of 30. I feel like you all as young people are far more smarter. You have far more understanding of the world, but you just don't have the lived experience of older folks. So the choices that, the only thing that I recognize as an older person is that I have the choice to say no to many things. Whereas you feel like, there is no choice. There's always a choice. There's always a choice, and you can curate those choices. You can curate your experiences. You can curate your life in a manner to give importance to your well-being, to your mental health, to your mind and your body. All of this is extremely important, and that's one of the things that I've learned the hard way. My mental health has gone for a toss many times over. I am extremely unhealthy, and I wish that I in my younger years would have recognized how important it is to prioritize myself and my body and my mind at times when I thought that nahi yaar, I have to achieve more, I have to I have to stay relevant and I have to do more. Now I don't give a shit. Now मुझे लगता है कि जो ना अगर मुझे 3 महीने तक कुछ नहीं लिखना मैं नहीं लिखूंगा. So in fact I feel really bad when I write like a thread and it goes, a lot of people share it. Sometimes I write some things and people viral. After that I feel really bad for all the new people who follow me, because I know that I'm not going to write for the next 20-30 days or 2 months. I'll not write anything. I'll just be sharing pictures of me and my mother, and people are just going to be like, yeah, isko to isliye follow kiya tha. Now he's just posting photos of panels and his family and stories about TV shows. But nahi hai mere paas, I'm tired. I don't want to constantly be always expressing, and as
Honestly,
you said,
this question about mental health and its perspectives and its implications and the way that you want to narrate it, it can go on and on for a really long period of time.
Juveria is
So-
now the great moderator and saying कि time बहुत हो गया.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, this can go
No,
on.
I want to convey my regrets to the audience right now present who wanted to give out their opinions and who wanted to speak to you, but they couldn't. But we can assure you, you will meet him again in the Lit Fest for sure. So we
Exactly.
can take the guarantee
Why
for that.
I extended an invitation. Do I have an acceptance from you, Nikhil sir? Or
Yeah,
what?
absolutely. So you went offline and then messaged Juveria, please stop the conversation is going too long. So I completely, Mr. Secretary, I'm completely, honored to follow your rules. तुमने इतना effort किया,
Completely fine. Like inshallah, we'll have you at the Lit Fest. Like we're looking forward to it, and I look forward to
Inshallah.
have more extensive discussion and more extensive questions. Like for people who are from AMU and for who are not from AMU as well. Like the previous question came from someone who's not from AMU, right?
I'm from LSR. I joined because of my friend, but I really enjoyed the talk.
Okay, great. Oh, no, that's absolutely fine. We are glad to have you all. So I'd like to invite Halima to say a few words. She wanted to just propose a vote of thanks.
These like question is अरे हमारे एमयू के नहीं थे, ये तो मतलब गलत हो रहा है हमारे साथ. आंसर सुनने पड़े, but questions तो हमारे भी नहीं है.
हमें अच्छा लग रहा है कि मतलब बाहर के लोग भी हमारे पास आ रहे हैं, तो हमारे ऑडियंस लेवल जो वो बढ़ रहा है, तो ठीक है.
Next time you have a fest, call me in person. I'd love to come. And then the best thing I do is that मेरा ना session में हमेशा request करता हूँ कि रात को रखा करो, so that afterwards ना when the things get over ना, then I can just continue chatting with you all. So if I go to a campus space, I always then say कि अभी पहले official कर लेते हैं, उसके बाद unofficially आराम से कैंटीन में जाके बैठेंगे और आराम से बातें करेंगे, because as I said, there's a lot more that I also want to listen. But thank you, Sabi, for allowing us to go on for this long. I know your job as a secretary would have been really tough. But
No, that's right. Halima, can you hear me? Can you start?
Just wanted to say one thing. Just 1 second, Halima. Just a pointer that while young people might not have the lived experiences of somebody who's in their 30s, I think we do have the empathy to understand if somebody is going through something. Just that.
Completely agree. 100%.
Yeah.
I've done a whole TEDx talk around that. So completely with you.
Darshana, you need to go back to college and tell that we had a very great session at AMU, something like that.
I will.
Yeah. Okay. Halima, now please.
Yeah.
Halima, तभी बेचारा चिल्ला पड़ेगा, अभी तुम खत्म करते हो session.
Halima is like, I'm going to mute everyone else and like, bas main
No,
bolungi.
I feel that this can go on for another 2 hours and none of us would be tired. And you will have such an interactive audience again. So first and foremost, I thought before today I knew just a very cool username Instagram, which was perhaps the best andaz apna fun I have seen. So
ये तुमने बोल रहा दिल जीत लिया. That's it. That's all I need to know.
another very personal thing, I think the most relatable thing you've ever said to date was that 1 hour you dedicate to watching Succession without anybody interrupting you, And that was the moment I just went, same. So yeah, we are immensely grateful to Nikhil sir for devoting his time and interacting with us here. This was perhaps, and I believe, truly believe, that the most interactive session so far UDLC has conducted in the last 4 months. And we have a very steady audience so far. So thank you so much, sir, for coming here and interacting with us. And I think you've stood to the promise which Juveria gave it to us. You're imparting the words of wisdom. And we're grateful to Professor F.S. Sharani, the coordinator of CEC, and Dr. Sadaf Farid, the president of UDLC, for the motivation, for his unwavering support and endless patience. We are grateful to Mohammad Sabi Ahmed, the secretary of UDLC, and
I made her even say that.
yeah, he
मुझे पता है तुमने
you
लिख
have
कर
to
मैसेज
thank
किया होगा
you have to thank me. Like, obviously, and obviously a huge thank you and shout out to Juveria, our moderator for today, who is, if you guys do not know, she's in a different time zone. She's living in Saudi Arabia and moderating
wow.
us from there. Yeah.
That's weird. I didn't know that, Julia. Your
Yeah.
neighbors.
Yes.
For all the hard work and for making this event a reality. Thank you so much, Juveria, to the entire team of UDLC who worked tirelessly to bring us here today. And lastly, to all the student members and fellow students of UDLC and those who have joined us who are not from AMU. Thank you so much for sticking so far and making this a huge success. Thank you, everyone.
As a matter of fact, just I wanted to state a fact. This event, this particular interaction had the lowest dropout rate of people from a particular online webinar.
Exactly.
And it's like please and this is the lowest dropout rate I've seen in the last 2 years of COVID. Okay, and that's a fact.
Truly, the most, I think, consistent audience we have today.
It was the longest also.
I just texted Juveria that the audition went very, very well, you know.
Thank you.
So we've extended the invitation and we hope you will be here for the AMU Literary Festival.
I genuinely love to. I also want to just say this one last thing, which is honestly, and I know that we joke about this, but it means a lot to me that you've all stayed for this long. You know, I mean, people always respect time of older people, but I've always had a great respect for your time. There's so much you can be doing with your time, and you have chosen to stay with me for so long. It really means a lot. Thank you so much. I'm really grateful. And you know, I end up going on and on, but I just genuinely enjoy talking to young people. So, you know, तो ये मेरी थोड़ी problem है life की, but yeah, I'm just glad that you all had a good time, and I hope to see you all again. Please keep in touch. You know, I'm on Instagram. You know, I have a great username. Halima has certified it.
Definitely, and for those who don't know, he gives out really nice book and TV shows recommendations.
I do.
He gave one out, I think today or yesterday, the Murakami one, and I'm like, oh, I was thinking about reading this one. So now let's see what happens.
Nikhil said, do you follow back people on Instagram?
I do.
Okay.
Do.
So you know who the secretary is. I think you know. You know, out of all the people I'm following, I think 50% are young people.
Yuvaa.
I think it's time to take the advantage of the opportunity, Secretary Sahab.
Yeah, I'm just reminding him so you know who the secretary is. So
Sabi bhai will extend all possible, you know, invitations right now. So in front of so many people, Nikhil sir cannot deny anything. Litmus में भी आना है, follow back भी करना है.
You know, audition भी दिया है, उसके बाद अभी सारा proof भी चाहिए. देखो, this is सभी understood कि देखो जब power में होते हैं ना तो ऐसे ही use करना होता है. देखो, talking about earlier, you have to get to a level of influence, then people can't deny you. Then they have to listen.
Yeah, I got that. Okay, we'll just conclude here. Yeah, we will share that.
I would very gladly share his Instagram handle, which is Taneja.
Are you from AMU? Are you from AMU, Abhi?
Yeah, I study in ZADC AMU.
Are you part of the UDLC as of now?
I just filled the UDLC form today.
Okay, glad that you did it. Or I would have made you do that anyway. So,
thank you for letting me ask questions, and thank you for allowing me to, you know.
No, it was really nice. That's a pleasure. We'll surely share the Instagram handle. Over to you. Thank you so much, Nikhil sir. Once again, like it was
Already done so.
Can I have some of you to put on your cameras? I'll take a picture with you all. Abhi to,
yeah. We also took a few screenshots of yours, so we're going to share with that.
अपने screenshot थोड़ा share करूँगा. अपने शक्ल को थोड़ा share करूँगा. तुम्हारे साथ चाहिए ना मुझे.
ठीक.
तो अगर if some of you can switch it on, it'll be really nice. जो रह गए हैं, अगर तुम जागे हुए हो तो फिर तो great. जब फोटो बोलोगे सब ऑन कर लेते हैं कैमरा. वैसे जो ना बोलेगा कैमरा ऑन करो तो नहीं. Moment is a picture. Yes, I'm here. Attendance तब मिला है photos का. Okay, I just make it. How do I make sure that I get the maximum number of views? Okay. Thank you. I'll say 3, 2, 1 and then just like, oh shit, my mistake. I'll say 3, 2, 1. Just after that, pretend you enjoyed it. Okay. So 3, 2, 1, pretend. Yeah, thank you for pretending. It was really nice meeting you all.
I don't think anybody of us here were pretending. It was very, very, very genuine response from all of us.
Thanks,
Thank you so much
Thanks.
for patiently bearing to all the 3 stages of the interview. The preparation, the action, and the narration.
For Zainab, we'll have the recording on YouTube. So, like, obviously, you can go back to the UDLC page.
All on YouTube.
Yeah, we are on YouTube. Like and subscribe again. Okay, University Waiting and Little Club, and so you'll have all that coverage there.
अच्छा मेरा नाम नहीं लगा लोगों के. अच्छी बात है. Okay, great everyone. Take care. Have a great evening.
Thank you everyone. Thank you everyone for coming. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.